director is Mr. Harry Hall, the brain behind all this, the Director General of EPI. And we would now request Mr. Harry Hall to tell us what we're going to see, what we're going to do in the next 3.5 days. How do we make us interested in 3.5 days? What kind of program we have? What are the issues we are going to discuss? Mr. Dhal will tell us. Mr. Dhal, sir.
Thank you, Ashok. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you here to the Regulators and Policymakers Retreat. I must make a confession that this response to the retreat has completely overwhelmed me in terms of the number of people, the quality of people, and the quality of the debates that we are anticipating. But before I get into the nuts and bolts of this discussion and this 3.5 day brainstorm, let me just step back and share with you where exactly we are coming from and what exactly do we expect in this country's rather challenging times. I'm not using the word troubled times. I always look upon challenges, and I think life is full of them. And I'm going to break up my presentation into two pieces. There's a macro level part of the presentation, and then we will get down into the specifics. My presentation is slightly different from the conventional, and I'm going to show you a short film which is specially made. It's called Beyond Imaginations, and it actually raises or perhaps increases the level of awareness of the times and the era or the way we are living. It actually starts on the banks of the river Indus, when Alexander meets a naked wise man, a fakir. And Alexander, in all his splendor with his army and his regalia and whatever, asks a very simple question to the naked wise man, and he says, "What are you doing sitting there on a rock, looking up at the sky?" And the gymnosophist says, "I'm experiencing nothingness. I'm just looking up at the sky and just experiencing, enjoying myself, experiencing nothingness." And Alexander says, "What a waste of a life. How can you spend your whole life sitting in one spot, looking up at the sky, doing nothing? What a waste of a life." So the gymnosophist said, "What are you doing, my friend?" He says, "I'm conquering the world." So the gymnosophist laughs. He says, "What a waste of a life. Why do you want to conquer the world?" I think this conversation is extremely important for us today to really understand where we are coming from. Because over the last 2,500 years, a lot of things have happened. And I'd like to spend a few minutes today in sharing with you perhaps a thought as to where we were, where we are reaching today, and then we'd like to come down to specifics and connect up as to why we are sitting here in this lovely environment in Goa. Just a few quick rushing through, if you like, of thoughts. I don't expect anyone in this audience to really strain their brains, so to speak. Just quick thoughts, and perhaps we can have a Q&A maybe afterwards or maybe tomorrow or whenever. So global capital, as we know it, is always looking for higher returns. And it only runs where there's profit. Capital needs three things: security, profit, and some kind of assurance of consistency, comfort, complacency. And emerging economies, they require money, they require capital. Now the problem here is, to develop your economies, you need capital. The question is, capital doesn't easily come to developing economies. So there's a little bit of a stop-start approach. Then the whole story about, just take profit for a minute, and you begin to realize that profit versus sustainable development, whatever you mean by sustainable development, is itself a big question. And I would like you to just keep this in the back of your mind when you watch the film. And then the question is development, whatever that means. Development towards what? I mean, I go back to something which Mahatma Gandhi said, that if we were to become as developed as the West, and to have the same per capita income and to have the same consumption levels, and he was talking in the 40s, where a country like Great Britain requires the whole of Asia as a colony and huge parts of Africa and maybe parts of America and Canada and the dominions of Australia, to have a country the size of Great Britain develop, then where is the space on this planet for a country like India? And by India, I mean South Asia. I'm talking about the 40s, to actually develop in the same way. So perhaps there is a need for us to look at our developmental model. Perhaps not. Perhaps maybe you want to tweak it. But the bottom line is, culturally, we in South Asia are much, much more compassionate, much, much more concerned by culture, by design, by our DNA, than perhaps the narrative which has developed in the West. So perhaps at the bottom corner you see the word inclusive. Profit. That in itself is a contradiction. How can I have inclusive profit? Profit itself is exclusive. We'll discuss that. The markets don't really provide a level playing field. And I remember reading a book called, it was about the civilized markets, you know, how markets are so civilized. And it fascinated me to see that the so-called markets had actually developed on the shoulders and at the cost of all these colonies and all these resources across the world, which had then brought in money to bring in so-called development. And particularly I was intrigued to find in pages of history between the lines that the sovereign kings and queens in Europe used to actually commission ships with criminals to go out and loot parts of the world, and whatever loot was brought back was shared with them. And then we talked about civilized market and being a part of the civilized world. I think that's another thought. Will weaker sections of society get left behind in this kind of a model, in this kind of a race? Now, we could have ignored this problem. I can build myself a $5 billion house in whichever city I want in India or anywhere in South Asia. But I have to at some point come down from that house. I have to at some point get into a car. And I have to at some point travel in that car, and I have to look at the people on the pavement, and I find a lot of them have not had proper food to eat, don't have a decent job, don't have proper clothes. So of what use is my $5 billion house? Is a question some of us would like to ask. And look at farmer suicides in India. These are all slight pointers towards the way we have perhaps looked at or not looked at the developmental model. The issue is sustainability itself. What is sustainable? Is a 2 meal a day sustainable? It may have been some time back. I don't think so. Being from the power sector, we watch how in the olden days you used to have one electric fan and one light. It was called a AEH connection, an all-electric home connection, and that was very happy. You go to the same house, and this was shared by me, by my friend in South India, in Karnataka, I remember. He says, Mr. Harry, the same house has got 72 different devices today. And this was a conversation in the early 90s. We've got videos, we've got television, we've got geysers, we've got heaters, we've got boilers, we've got grinding mixers, we've got washing machines, we've got, in the south we have the dosa, the grinding masala dosa machine. He says, I've got so many electrical things there. The same AEH connection has gone up in a geometrical progression by 72 times. And so then you have creating markets solely for profit at the cost of the poor is obviously not sustainable. So then you have this concept of corruption. Now, I must confess to this audience, I'm still trying to figure out what is corruption and what is not. And I don't want to spend too much time on it and preempt some of the discussions, but bakshish used to be, or a tip to the guy who did a good job and gave you your drink very quickly, or the guy who carried, the coolie who carried your luggage. Today I go to a Heathrow airport, I'm supposed to pay the porter £9, I give him a £10 note. Is that corruption? So I'm not very clear on corruption as such, and we're going to look at that issue because I think we can no longer ignore this fact, and we must come to some kind of settlement mentally on what we are willing to live with and what we are not. And believe me, the cultural discourse is changing and variating from place to place and region to region. Simmering social tensions that erupt in violence. Unfortunately, Kokrajhar has erupted again today. As I left the room, I was watching television. And there are very complicated, complex issues. And then we say this collapse of governance. It's a very strong phrase, whatever that means. So you look at our systems of governance. They all find their roots in the 1800s, early 1900s. Are they relevant in today's information age? He's the district collector who was supposed to collect taxes on a horse. And a lot of my IAS friends know about this. Now relevant in an age where you have Twitter and you have television and you have all kinds of social media. And look at the impact of social media. What kind of governance are we looking at? I mean, should we not look at something different? So is it a flawed developmental model? This is my favorite cartoon. We created this in-house in 98 at a presentation at the World Bank Summit in 98 in Washington. And it's called The Elephant in the Marketplace. It's all about how, when you go into a developing country and you try and give it the development model, you find that there's a big fat elephant that comes in the form of monopolies, monopsonies, all kinds of efforts to dominate that market. And that guy, the elephant, does not allow market principles to work. And because it doesn't allow market principles to work, the immediate result is the cost of services go up, consumers get unhappy, and the rest is all well known. Well-known facts: India, current population 1.21 billion, literacy rate 74, unemployment rate 9.4, internet user base 46%. Total spend in India, health numbers, we have a whole slide here. How do we unshackle the potential? Possible solutions. Social benefits from development of the power sector. I'm going to more or less stop here and let you watch the movie. And I hope my friends have got the movie ready. And I think I'll just conclude after that. Can we have the movie, please? Thank you. ठिकाने हूँ या आजादे मकान हूँ, जहां में हूँ या खुद सारा जहां हूँ. Am I confined in the four walls of my mind, or am I beyond all worlds? Am I in the world? Is the world because of me?
There is development happening everywhere. Infrastructure is being built, markets are booming, growth is happening at a rate never seen before. And yet, around the world, there is great unhappiness. The environment is being destroyed, economies are in trouble, cultures are being eroded, people are migrating from villages to cities, poverty is on the rise, the gap between the rich and poor is rising, the sense of security is going away, infrastructure is collapsing. What is happening out there? Is it a problem of wealth generation, or is it a problem of wealth distribution? Or is it the problem of development itself? We see development only in material terms. Could it be that somewhere along the line we have forgotten development in emotional terms? Perhaps that is why our societies are becoming more exclusive than inclusive. In nature, might is right. Nature has no favorites. Every animal has got its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Nature is the ultimate meritocracy. Humans seek to improve on nature because we refuse to be animals. We refuse to live by the law of the jungle. We want to give rights to the meek. And so we imagine a better world with different notions of beauty, righteousness and fairness. But the thing is, different communities imagine perfection differently. And therefore there are different cultures around the world. In India, there is a story of two gods who were brothers who went around a race 3 times around the world. One of them flew around the mountains, the continents, the oceans and the stars. The other simply twirled around himself 3 times and declared himself winner. When asked for an explanation, he said, I went around my world. You went around the world. What matters more? Culture is my world. Culture is how a community sees the world. Let us look at the different ways in which people eat food. How Indians eat food as compared to how a classical Western meal is served. In a Western meal, you eat exactly what the chef has prepared for you.
We have the 2 sets of glasses here, the smaller one for white wine, the larger one for red wine. The cutlery we have reflects the number of courses. We can have soup, a starter course, and then the main course.
In a classical Indian meal, you mix and match the food, so what you taste is very different from what was cooked in the kitchen.
An Indian thali, unlike how you eat in the West, everything is served on the thali together, from the desserts to the rice to the vegetable.
Let's look at music. If you listen to Western classical music, the notion of harmony dominates. Western classical music has a linear beat. Indian classical music has a cyclical beat.
The whole concept of rhythm is cyclic. In comparison to a Western concept of rhythm, which is linear, when we say linear, it's either 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you can't call this a cycle. Or it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whereas in Indian concept, this cycle goes, let's say, a 16-beat cycle. And recite and say, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da.
Indian classical music, the concept of harmony does not exist. And look at the markets, a supermarket or a hypermarket, everything is about efficiency. The aisles are once again in a grid-like format. Well, in Indian bazaar, people are sitting in clumps, in groups. It looks apparently chaotic, inefficient, but everyone knows where the buyer is, where the seller is, transactions happen, business is done. It is just very different from the Western market.
Well, I really prefer buying from the mall. You know, the food is absolutely latest batch and everything. Besides anything, it's well stacked, well aligned.
Now let us look at the streets of India. A traditional Indian street will meander through, go left and go right. The streets are never crisscross each other perpendicular. So if you go to the city of New York, the roads are organized in a grid-like pattern. If you observe carefully, there is consistency in the way food is eaten, music is composed, and cities are designed in the West. They're all linear. In India, they tend to be cyclical and spiral and non-linear. It indicates two different ways of thinking which manifests culturally as two different things. Almost 2,500 years ago, they say Alexander
घर का खर्चा चलाना, बहन का शादी करना, इसलिए अब सोचे यहाँ गांव में गुजारा नहीं होगा, अब मुंबई जाना पड़ेगा।
प्रगति तो हो रहा है, ये बिल्डिंग बन रहा है, शॉपिंग मॉल्स बन रहा है, लेकिन हम लोगों को रहने के लिए पता नहीं जगह कहाँ मिलेगा।
And the industry wanted markets. And because you want consumers in these markets, the consumer discourse went about eroding.
Getting from beyond the concepts and ideas. The whole retreat is designed to give different flavors, different thoughts, different strands during the next 3 days. Very often I was asked, why is the regulators and policy makers retreat got all kinds of different people coming? How does this help the power sector? How does it help the regulator? And my response is very simple. The regulator is not living, or the policy maker is not living in a vacuum. Or the stakeholder is not living in a vacuum. He's living, thriving, breathing, interacting, moment to moment, second to second with people around him. And therefore, it's very, very interesting, important, I guess, and I think challenging at the same time to engage people, to share different strands of thought. So what we've done, ladies and gentlemen, is over the next few days, we have brought in few strands of thoughts in the sessions that we're looking at. I'm given to understand there are almost 60 speakers. That's a hell of a lot of speakers, I can tell you that. But then we want to pack, it's like a movie, an action-packed movie. It was so gripped by the different things happening, we just won't let you rest. We're going to keep giving you new ideas and thoughts, and hopefully something will come out of it. Just after I finish, I'm going to request Dr. Pramod Deo, who's the chairman of our Central Energy Regulatory Commission, to share his thoughts on how turning the power sector around as the title, and the role of government, regulators, and the private sector. Why the private sector? Because in 91, we did what China had done much before. It was the government decided to ask the private sector to come on board and augment the infrastructure of this country. How successful that has been, how we are reacting to that today is a subject of debate. But let me share with you that 2 years ago, we did a whole 3 days on public good versus private profit. Some of you were there, and I'm sure you would have found it very interesting, and I'm sure those points are still very relevant today. Social benefits from the development of the power sector. When I first got into the sector in 1986, I never imagined, I thought it's a very dry and sukha and boring subject, bijli, and very, very opaque. How boring. But began to realize over a period of time it touches our lives, just almost like our breath. It's so important. I had this fancy idea that one day I'll go to the Himalayas and look at mountains and just retire. Then I realized that I'm a news junkie. I want to watch TV. I want to hear Sapan and Dinesh Ji and so many other eminent people on TV every day. And I want newspapers, and I want to go and have a cup of coffee, and I want to go and see my friends. And I can't sit alone in the Himalayas. And God forbid something happens to me, by the time the ambulance reaches there, it'll be 100 years. So no Himalayas for me. So I am interacting, and I realize that for me, electricity is a fix. Themes of the retreat on day 2, challenges of an inward-looking world. Can we actually integrate the two Indias? Bharat Inc. or India Inc. with Bharat. Is activism in India a boom or a curse? On the one hand, you have people fighting for the rights of the land, people whose lands are being taken away. On the other hand, there's a huge issue about how do you develop industry, how do you generate jobs, and so on and so forth. Is democracy a convenient crutch for aggression? Should we have been like China with one nice benevolent dictator who said this is where the McDonald's will come up and anyone who says no gets shot, or do we do it in some other way? In this interdependent world, are we creating a uniform world order for people to live in and behave? I don't know about the world order, but I do see, as a business guy, we are moving towards international accounting practices. We are going towards Basel norms 1, 2, 3. We are moving towards GAR and all kinds of exciting things. And all these guys used to tell me about this. I always ask them, I said, where were you guys in 2008? Where was Basel 1, 2, 3? In 2008, when the banking system went for a spin, and I don't get an answer. But nevertheless, we are going there, so that's where we are. No full stops in being Indian. That's another very interesting session. And then do we have the perseverance and imagination to innovate? I think we do, but let's see what the session comes up with. Now, the structure of this conference is such that in the morning we have master classes. The master classes focus on very hot and burning issues in the power sector. So those of you who are very bored with the power sector, or not really fascinated, I invite you all to continue taking a swim, having a nice breakfast, take a walk on the beach. Don't go too far into the water, it's not safe. But those of you who are really interested in knowing what's happening in the power sector, these master classes may be useful. We are really going to have some intense discussion on where we are in the power sector. We recently had this very dramatic blackout, which was touted as the biggest blackout in the world, with 600 million people were without electricity. Of course, I had to correct somebody by telling him that half of those guys never had electricity anyway, but that's besides the point. So there are a lot of exciting and burning issues we're going to talk about, and I hope our friends will take full advantage of the discussions that take place. There's a special discussion on ethical business practices, challenges of doing business in India, corruption, efficiency, and the way forward for the private sector. We do 2 international events a year, one in London and one outside India, on energy security and basically for Asia. And we found, to our horror, a lot of the Western companies were worried about coming to India and coming to these parts of the world because of the laws that prevent them from being even indirectly tied up into an ethical business practice issue. For example, sitting in London, we found that you have the British Bribery Act, you have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of the United States, you have the UN laws, then you have the Indian, the Anti-Corruption Act and so on and so forth. So you need to have a battery of lawyers who are experts in all these just to do a business transaction. It was as bad as that. So I think we do also need to look at this issue of corruption and how the private sector can really get on with it if they have to, at least in South Asia, get on with building infrastructure. And then we have the elephant in the marketplace I mentioned. Does the media have a pernicious influence in India? Have we got into a situation where there are these media trials every day? And so I'm going to say Ashok Das Gupta, my friend here, actually is a schizophrenic, and he rapes 5 women a day and gets away with it, and he kills 5 at night. And I put it on TV. Poor chap, he can file me for defamation, but that's a long story. It's on TV, it's news. 3 days later, it's gone. But poor Ashok Das Gupta, his neighbors won't talk to him, the milkman will stop his supplies, and I promise you his wife won't talk to him ever again. So is it, what is it? I don't know. We can talk about it. Have we relegated Parliament to disruption rather than discourse? I think this is very, very interesting because the last 3 days Parliament is not functioning for whatever reason. And I don't understand politics, so I confess I'm at a loss here. But the fact is the Parliament is being disrupted. The role of education in promoting sustainable development. I remember a conversation I had with a international group which wanted to do work out of Europe. A lot of money being spent on educating kids through television, through satellite. And I asked that guy one question. I said, what stories are you going to put on that TV channel? Is it going to be Baba Black Sheep and, Humpty Dumpty and Jack and Jill? Or are you going to adapt it to the region? And he looked very shocked. He says, what do you mean? I thought the whole world understands. I said, listen, we have grown up in KG listening to, Baba Black Sheep and all, but that's not our culture. That's ridiculous. You have to come up with something where we can identify with. And so let's look at what is the role of education and what is education in sustainable development. The craft of consumerism, I think that's very interesting and very important session, and I'm glad Kalikesh Singhdeo is here. We're looking at, are we politicizing our natural resources? And I'm really looking forward to that debate myself. In an interdependent world, are we going to have a single currency? We have single laws on corruption. I want to share one of my frustrations on sanctity of contract. My favorite story, and a lot of you have heard it, please bear with me. I remember a discussion we had at a conference where a sitting judge of the High Court said, sanctity of contract, rule of law will be honored by the courts. Absolutely. The second speaker got up and said, sanctity of contract is fine, but as long as it's in public interest. But we can reopen contracts in public interest. Now, whatever public interest means is a question mark. The third guy turns around and says, yes, sanctity of contract is fine, public interest is fine, but we will definitely open it in case it's malified or an allegation of malified. The last person stood up, and he was from Harvard, and he was teaching at Bangalore Law School, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, and I quote, English jurisprudence is where our laws are coming from. At the heart of the issue is I am as much entitled to enforce my contract as I have the right to renege on it, as long as I make a profit. As long as I make a profit. Now this stunned me, even though I was one of the organizers, because I had been brought up in this culture of Raghukul Reet Sada Chali Aayi, Pran Jai Par Vachan Na Jai, how our ancestors have given up their lives, given up their wherewithal just because they gave their word, and how important the word was. And here was a situation where written contracts can be reneged as long as you make profit. So there's a huge disconnect that I began to see between our, with due respects, the way our legal system looks at dispensing law and perhaps the culture. So anyway, are we going to have a single currency? Art and aesthetics as an integral part of life and inspiration. We have some amazing, amazing people here who are going to share, world famous, and they're going to talk about it as to how it's so connected to life itself. Challenges in the hydro sector. My gosh, where do we start? Water, ladies and gentlemen, is the real issue in times to come, even more than electricity. And whether it's drinking water, irrigation, the whole works. Groundwater, we can go on talking about it. And so therefore, when we build dams or when we have run-of-the-river projects, what are the challenges? Where do we go from here? Why is it that we are lagging behind? Should we be looking at new ways of doing things? On day 4, we go to, can IT revolutionize electricity distribution? Do smarter grids need more regulatory and policy support? Feeder separation projects. Feeder separation means you separate the feeders for agricultural sector so that you don't have power cuts, or you give the farmers 8 hours like they do in Gujarat, or 6 hours. They tell the farmer, this is how much power you get, that's it. They have separate feeders, there's no interference. Or are we looking at the bugs? I don't know whether you're aware, there was a bug called Stuxnet, which actually disabled Iran's nuclear project and set it back by 1.5 years. It came through the net, or it came through the IT systems, and recently we've got something called Flame, which sits on your system, gets instigated whenever it's been triggered. Do we want smart grids which will further get affected by this? I don't know how much of you guys know that our electricity grids are very IT dependent as we speak. And so cybersecurity is an issue we're going to look at. Geopolitics of energy in India and its neighborhood. There's gas in Iran, there's hydropower in Tajikistan, there's hydropower in Nepal. We already get 2,500 odd megawatts from Bhutan. Pakistan needs power, we need power. Bangladesh needs power. Sri Lanka wants the 2,000 megawatt interconnector and needs power. So I think we need to look at the situation in a more holistic manner and see how we can go forward. There's a masterclass on security, overview on India's threats and options. Threats defined as internal, external, cyber, the works, need for training for emergency response, increasing risk to Indian infrastructure. This is very important for the regulators to understand that your infrastructure is the one that you're regulating, power, petroleum, whatever, needs to be protected and needs to be protected very, very robustly, because otherwise you can have situations which are out of control. I'll just share a quick thought with you. Thanks to the solar activity that's been increasing over the last few years, you are getting an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, and if that pulse, it has already happened 4 or 5 times, you don't understand, that burns out all your transformers. The replacement of a 50 or 100 MVA transformer takes you 12 months or 15 months. You are in trouble, so you need to find ways and means to secure your electricity infrastructure, not just from human intervention, you've also got interstellar intervention happening. Tackling urban terrorism in India, ghettos becoming breeding grounds for terrorists, cyber attacks on grids. Let the deliberations begin, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you.